Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. So 2 days ago, I put out a video talking about dice mechanics for the game that I want to make for myself. And I mentioned I was having a bit of trouble trying to find a mechanic that worked. Without rehashing the entire core mechanic for the game, based on your skill and ability score, you would get a number of dice, some of which would be upgraded to better dice. And one number would determine how many dice you get, and the second number would determine how many would be upgraded. And the dice that you get would be of different kinds. They'd progress from lower to higher average scores, and then some would be further upgraded. But I couldn't figure out a mechanic and how to get that to work in an intuitive and easy to understand way. I want this system to be simple to pick up, so there's not too many calculations. It doesn't take too long to figure out what dice you're going to need. But I also want it to be powerful and flexible enough for the purposes I have in mind. And I couldn't figure out how to do it. Now, I mentioned that I like going for walks and thinking about dice, and this is true when I'm swimming laps in the pool or going for a hike. I'm often doing maths problems in my head. And since I made that video 2 days ago, I've walked about 17 kilometers in the snow. That's a bit more than 10.5 miles. But it was yesterday when I was at a classical music concert that I had a flash of inspiration. The concert was being performed in a small church. Well, it's actually quite a big church in a small town just north of Helsinki called Karava. My wife is a classically trained violinist, and she was performing as part of an orchestra doing Dvorak's Serenade for Strings, which is a beautiful piece of music. So I was sat in this lovely church listening to this wonderful classical music, my youngest son asleep on the bench next to me, and I closed my eyes, I let the classical music wash through me, and I started thinking about dice, because that's the kind of person that I am. So I realised a player would have these set of dice, some of which were going to be upgraded. And I thought, what if we upgrade the top dice first? So you upgrade the best dice first, but then that leaves you with lots of small useless dice that you're not going to enjoy. How about if you upgrade the smallest dice first? Well, that's going to have the least impact overall and it makes the upgrade less valuable. Then, inspired by one of my favourite TV comedies, I thought, what if we worked from the middle out? And if you can tell me what series that's from, you'll earn some free nerd cred. So put something in the comments and impress me. The middle out system I thought had potential. You find the midpoint of your dice and then you start upgrading on either side of the midpoint, a higher, a lower, a higher, a lower. But mechanically that sounded really complicated and it would slow down gameplay, and it still wasn't what I was looking for. And it was then I had a flash of genius. And it turns out the flash of genius was the simplest idea. It did everything I wanted mechanically, and it was very, very easy to do. And it uses a potential player aid, which I have made here. Here is a set of dice I have glued to a ruler. And the set of dice progress from D4s to D6 to D8 to D10 to D12, all the way up to D20. And there are 15 dice here. Now this is just representative. As I've said before, my system's going to have specialty dice, very high variance with action points rather than numbers on them. This is just a representative idea. So what's going to happen is one of those numbers, either skill or ability score, is going to tell you how many dice you get, starting from the smallest ones and counting up. But the other score is going to tell you how many of the dice you skip. So let's say you had a strength of 4 and an athletics of 4. You're going to skip the first 4 dice and then take the next 4. That's how it works. It's that simple. So each dice, as we move down the scale, gets better. So each dice is either the same as the one before or better than the one before. Now, I might need to differentiate with more kinds of dice. So maybe there will be slightly better ones and slightly different ones, and they can be differentiated based on size or color or symbol, some way to easily tell them apart. But you can put them on a little tracker, or you have a visual tracker of what goes where. And the two numbers are how many dice you skip and then how many dice you take. It's that easy, that simple. Players don't necessarily have to arrange their dice in this order every time. If there's a visual aid, you can see, oh, okay, these are the dice I'm skipping, I'll ignore those. Those are the dice that I need to collect for this ability check. That simple. Now, the system I had in mind had the higher number telling you how many dice you get and the lower number telling you how many dice you skip. But I decided to change that round. I wanted to have the higher number be how many dice you skip and the lower number be how many dice you take. The reason for this is that taking an extra dice is always better than skipping a dice. Because if you take an extra dice, let's say we start right at the beginning. If you take 6 dice and skip none, you take the first 6 dice. But if you take 7 dice, you get 1 extra dice. Alternatively, if you have 6 dice and skip the first one, you don't get this one and you go all the way up to the same point. So you still take the same best dice, but you just take 1 dice less. That means that skipping dice is less valuable than taking an extra one. And the way I have it is that I want the highest stat to be the least useful one. So that kind of encourages balance. It's better to have 6 and 6 rather than 7 and 5. So the first number tells you how many dice you skip on the scale, and the second number tells you how many more dice you take after that. Easy peasy. And it's such a simple mechanic that I question why I didn't think of this before. But maybe that's just the way my brain works. Maybe I get lost in complicated systems when there is a simple system that works even better. I've talked about this in many other videos. I've mentioned this concept of rules zen, that rules should be simple but flexible. And I think I've hit the jackpot there. This is a super simple rule, but it has a lot of mechanical depth and flavor to it. So it does everything that I want mechanically in an incredibly simple package. With that in mind, there's also a player aid that can be printed on a sheet of paper or can be turned into a physical dice caddy. And I love this concept of having player aids that can be free, but you can also make a nice version if the player wants. I like that. That appeals to me. So with this ruler with dice blue tacked to it, I have been able to finalize exactly how I want my dice mechanic to work. Well, maybe not exactly. I still need to work out the numbers on the dice and work out the exponential growth curve that will follow. But that's just maths. The concept is there. Now, I'm not going to promise that I'm not going to completely change this. At several points in the past, I've decided, yes, this is absolutely the mechanic that I want to use. And then I've figured something out that either doesn't work or I can do better later on. But right now, I'm really happy with this idea. And I think I'd like to go through it and describe it in its entirety in a video all by itself. I've had other videos where I've talked about it, but now that I've got this idea laid out, I think I can nail it down and do a better job. But I wanted to talk about my thought process as well, because these videos, they are as much a way for me to try and explain my thought process and record it as anything else. If someone's finding it interesting, then that's just an amazing bonus. But the ability for me to talk about it really helps my creative process. So if you've been watching and following along, what do you think of this idea? Do you like it? Please do let me know. And enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.